Hey again, folks. This video, I'm going to offer the first of two frameworks that I've been using or finding helpful in thinking about Leaven and what we're up to in this community. And it's called the two loops framework. It's a framework for thinking about how systems change. So let's get into it. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Now, hopefully this is working and you're seeing my screen. This is the two loops from the Berkana Institute. So not my framework. It's a framework that was developed by the Berkana Institute. So here you can see that there are two loops here. The first is kind of an arc, kind of like a rainbow. And the second is an upside down, kind of like a U, like a smile. And what we have here is this first loop, the rainbow loop, is the dominant system. So when we're talking about systems, it can be small scale, it can be large scale. Small scale example would be an organization, a school. How does a school change? How does culture and systems change within, one entity? Versus it could be large scale as well, thinking about perhaps the US public education system. So within this dominant system, what we have is kind of a rising into prominence. Then at the top, we have an apex. And then the system crests, wanes, and moves into death and compost. While at the apex, there are those for whom this system doesn't work. Okay, so that might be queer folks, it might be people of color, could be women, could be whomever for whom a system isn't working. And we're going to call those folks experimenters. Okay, so they're going to get whatever it is that they need that they're not finding in the system. They're going to start creating things. And then over time, they're going to start finding each other. So they're going to connect, they'll build networks. As they do that, those networks, folks will grow. They'll form community of practice. Okay, and those networks will even deepen and grow in influence until that emergent system becomes more the system of influence. Meanwhile, as this emergent system is bubbling and fermenting and becoming stronger and more potent, the dominant system is waning. And there are folks inside of that dominant system that are working to stabilize it, to kind of keep it as strong as possible, who then also might begin hospicing this system, or even moving it into death or compost. Some of these folks that are doing hospicing and stabilizing might even illuminate a choice that's available to individuals or entities inside of that system to make a transition into the emerging system of influence. And then, of course, there are always outliers, edge cases, some of the experimenters who maybe didn't, their ideas were different than the other ideas. And maybe they go on to continue experimenting, connect with others that are doing similar work, similar experimentations. So that's kind of the broad framework. Now, I've been finding this helpful in thinking about Leaven and thinking about Leaven as emerging out of mainstream white American Protestantism. There is an article that I read recently. I'm going to link to it in the newsletter, maybe on the website, wherever you're watching this video. There are several articles actually that I've found recently that are about kind of as churches are reaching that waning and moving into death or compost, folks are longing for community. Maybe the church hasn't been meeting their needs for all kinds of reasons, but they're still longing for connection, meaning making, ritual, places to grow spiritually, places to engage in difficult spiritual, I think, work of unlearning dominant culture ways of being, okay? And a lot of that can happen only in community. So this has been helpful for me in imagining what Leaven can be, what Leaven is already, and has been up to for these last 10 years in trying to do something different, in forming communities that are interested in meaning making, are interested in relationship, are interested in organizing for social justice, but aren't necessarily connected to a broader religious institution. So if then that's some of what Leaven is up to, which I'll be curious to hear from you all if this resonates or not, so come to a house meeting. But if that's indeed true, then some of maybe what our next steps might be is to think about what other individuals, entities, organizations, communities are doing similar kinds of work. So here's where I'm situating Leaven, and there are some examples that we can look to, such as the dinner party, which is kind of a network of, it provides a framework for people to gather and build community around a meal and story and connection. Not Sorry Productions is another one here, and they use secular texts and treat them as sacred within podcasts, workshops, kind of trip experiences, pilgrimages, and actually are building a community online around that kind of treatment of treating a secular text as if it is sacred. There are other examples here. I'm also going to link to some examples in, again, the newsletter or wherever you're watching this video, that I think it's helpful to know that there are other groups that are approaching this kind of work, that are curious and experimenting with how to build community in a really intentional way that might even be bumping up against ritual, might be bumping up against meaning making within community. The other groups are experimenting with this as well. So I'm going to close with sharing sort of a thesis that I have, which is that modern life does not foster deep spiritual work that is also secular and communal. And deep spiritual work, I mean, connection, I mean, that doesn't have to be work, it can be fun, but I'm thinking also about that interchange work. I'm going to talk about this a little bit in the next video too. But for in modern life to experience spirituality, there aren't many places where we can do that is both in community and not religious. Most places where we can do it, it's as an individual and or in a faith-based setting. So I do think that this is a place where Leaven can fill the gap as we think about our work at the level of interchange, outer change, working in community and relationships, and collective change as we continue to organize and seeking that full integration that can be met in community. So that's a lot there, but I'll be so curious to hear what kinds of reactions people have to these ideas. And I'll be sharing another video tomorrow, probably. So keep an eye out for that to hear more about the Sacred Spiral Framework. Thanks, everyone. Bye. Now I'm trying to find out how to stop recording. Hello. Stop sharing and then stop recording.